Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'd like to welcome you here to Starspace. And if you are watching on Twitch, thank you very much for watching on there as well. Starspace and Techlahoma, they get money from Twitch. So if you have Amazon Prime and you go and you hit subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything, and Twitch gives Techlahoma money, which they help use to run these events. Really quick, I'm going to be giving a talk on the 4 stages of DevOps within an organization. But before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dodzidenu Dzakuma, and I am first and foremost a Techlahoma volunteer. I run one of the user groups with 2 other co-organizers. The group is Design Tech OKC. It's a group that focuses on UX design and how it merges with tech. Additionally, in Oklahoma, I'm the local leader for a group called the Interaction Design Foundation. And what they do is they promote education of human-computer interaction and user experience design. You can go on there, you can take courses from them. They're pretty tough, but they're very educational. You can focus on the things that you want to focus on and go from there to integrate that into your workflow. I'm also a full-stack developer and a DevOps engineer, but I also talk a lot about UX. You might be thinking, why does UX matter? Well, it matters because as developers, and having done development for a long time, I believe that I agree with this statement, and this comes from one of the books I'll be talking about today, which is Accelerate, which talks about DevOps in a company. And they said that ideally, we should reward developers for reducing the lines of code that are in the application, or by changing the business process. And it's really easy to change business processes if you know about UX and how to apply that. Developer waste is big waste in a company, and you don't want to waste developer time by making something that you haven't proven that's just going to get changed. If you can prove it some other way, you want to do that. Really quick, the order of business today, I'm going to tell you what the challenge is with the stages of DevOps in a company. I'm going to go over some required reading, so reading that you should go and do. I'll also tell you how we're going to look at the different stages and preparing for the stages of the development. We'll define and analyze those stages, and then I have an M. Night Shyamalan twist. If you don't know who M. Night Shyamalan is, he makes these movies and there's a twist in it. And you're like, what? Really? I have one of those. We'll also make time for some questions if you have any on Twitch. If you are looking at this live, please think of your questions as you go along. If you have questions, we'll get them at the very end of the presentation. Also, I want to say that this is going to be very Star Wars themed. There might be some Star Wars stuff in it. If you see anything Star Wars, you can laugh if you like. Who's this for? This is for any DevOps engineers that are out there. Everyone here a DevOps engineer? Yes? Okay, awesome. Managers and stakeholders. So I'm going to be looking at a more high-level view. It's for the DevOps engineers who want to tell their company about breaking down their monolithic systems into microservices, or why it is important to have a good DevOps initiative. It's for managers so that they can see what the process is, how they're going to benefit from it. And it's for stakeholders as well, because they need to know about this, because stakeholders are the people who can really drive the change in an organization, as well as anybody who just wants to get swole like Ben Swallow over here, because you like knowledge. The challenge. What is the challenge? The challenge is, in your company, I want you to think about your company right now. You need to be able to do 10 meaningful deployments all the way to production so that a customer can use it per day. So right now in your company, can you do this? 10 times today. Not the same change 10 times, but 10 different changes. I might be asking, Doji, man, are you serious? Are you serious? Yes, I am serious. You want to do this. So think about that a little bit, and then I'll come back and tell you why. Now, there's a book called The Goal. How many people have read this book? Anyone? No? Okay. This is an amazing book. You have to read this book. It's about the manufacturing process at a factory. But the biggest selling point of this book is understanding how to find your constraints in your company and eliminate them. It looks at it from the physical of a manufacturing plant. And something that they talked about a lot was they had some constraints in the plant, and it didn't matter how many people they added to their workforce, how many trucks they added at the other end. Because there was a bottleneck in the factory, it stopped them from being successful in hitting their targets. It really talks about how to find where to make improvements, and it talks a lot about the Toyota method and why it's important to go and see what's happening in the manufacturing process yourself, especially if you're a manager, especially if you're leading a team, to go to where the team is and see it in person, what's happening. Another book that you would want to read, and I highly recommend this on audiobook, and these books are similar, is The Phoenix Project. And The Phoenix Project talks about IT. But the thing is, they borrowed a lot from the book called The Goal, and they see IT as a manufacturing process. They talk about the types of work that go in a business. For example, you have your business projects, the ones that make you money. You have the internal projects, the things that set your business up for making money, like setting up servers, setting up developers so that they can make the code that makes your business project. Changes, maybe your business project process changes, which happens all the time. Businesses develop, they change. Changes are another type of work, but this is the big one, unplanned work, fighting fires. You have a bug in your system and you need to change it immediately. They talk about the implications of these different types of work and what they mean for your company. But overall, it's that IT is a manufacturing process. And I'll explain that as we go along. So I told you that the challenge is 10. 10 deploys a day to your customer, and you're asking why. Why, you may ask, but that is why you fail. The reason why you want 10 deploys to the customer a day is because it's going to help you find where your bottlenecks are. If you say right now, I can't deploy, it's I can't deploy because of something. I can't deploy 10 times a day because of. That because of is where you should be focusing your energy. So let's think about this. If we have a scale, how painful is it for you to deploy? Really easy? One person in your company can do it in less than an hour, deploy to the customer. That's the ideal system. One person pushes a button, all changes in production. However, difficult might be something where a team of 15 on a Friday and maybe a weekend, they can do a deploy by Monday morning, maybe, spending an all-nighter. If that's where you're at, then you really should be listening to this. But text is hard to work with. Let's visualize that a little bit. Easy. Jar Jar Binks got this. That's an easy deploy. That's where we want to. Difficult. Your application has the high ground. This is what ends up happening. I'm sorry. So you don't want to be in the other situation. You want Jar Jar Binks to be able to deploy. Let's go ahead and take a look at each of these stages and let's break them down. I'm going to tell you what the signs of the stage are so that you can evaluate where your company is now. I'm going to give you a few targets for improvement, things that if you're at that stage you can improve upon, and then insights. In this stage, this is what we've learned and this is what we can work with. So let's start from the bottom. I'm going to bring you through the not so fun stuff and we'll work our way on up. Infancy. You're starting and stopping a lot of things. This is the infancy stage. And in the infancy stage, your company might be struggling a lot with some of these things. I'm just going to touch upon them. I'm not going to go through each one. But the biggest one is development is slow and you're doing slow manual tests. Your company wants to meet the needs of its market. It wants to adjust to its customers, but it can't because of all of this slowness. So the next thing you say is, well, if we're slow, it's probably because we don't have enough people. Let's just toss bodies at the problem to scale it. Now, I already touched on that in the goal. They did that. And they were realizing that they're spending more money on personnel, but the actual place where their bottleneck isn't being improved. So it doesn't matter how much you're doing, it's a vanity metric. We have 300 people. How come it's not faster? Maybe we need 600 people. You're not focusing on the constraint. You have these deployments where you have to do everything at the same time or you can't deploy at all. You want to be able to deploy just a piece of your architecture or a piece of something in increments. That's where we would get the 10 deploys a day. Now, when you're in your infancy, what your company is doing is you probably have an agile workflow. It's agile, but it's actually waterfall, where everything comes from the top down. No one has a visual on the metrics that go into why you're making these changes. You're doing a lot of firefighting, lots of bug work. Oh, we have a bug, we have a new thing. You aren't able to predict what's going on. And your teams are siloed. One team might solve a problem, and another team might have the same problem, but you can't share it, so you duplicate the work. Now, Nordstrom went through a DevOps evolution. They changed how their system works so that they could deploy for their internal systems. And they had the same conclusion. Well, everything is slow right now. Let's go ahead and toss more bodies at the problem. She suggested that we need to find what the real problem is. In the goal, the problem was we have a heat treat oven that we use for baking the paint onto our doors. And because of the amount of product we can put in, it doesn't matter how many people we have before or after, this is one of our bottlenecks. We have to either find a way to put more things in here, speed up the process, or something. So it's very important to look at what the true problem is and focus on that. Now, when you're in your infancy, what you want to do is you need to break down your monoliths. You might have a monolithic architecture. You need to break it down. Otherwise, you can't deploy in pieces. The next thing that you want to do is break down your monoliths. I just said that. It's like Flight Hub. Break down your monoliths and then break them down again. You don't want to have monoliths. You want to have small pieces that you can deploy. They should all be autonomous. You want to make sure everything can be accessed via the command line. It doesn't matter if it's a user-facing GUI interface. It has to have a command line interface. Otherwise, you can't speed up your testing, you can't automate your testing, and you can't fully leverage your QA team. You want to automate some things, especially the way you test. And you want to start getting your QA team to write down the steps for your test cases. They have to write it down so that you can say 1, 2, 3, 4. That can be codified once it's in that state. And you want to find any constraints that might be preventing multiple deployments. That's no monolith. Actually, it probably is. I already talked on this in a different talk, and I'll give you the link at the end, but you really need to define what a monolith is, and it's all of your services together in one application. Why are they a problem? Because if you have them all together in one application, you can't distribute them. So you need to break them down. How long will breaking them down take? Well, it depends. If you've had your application for 20 years or so, you expect 2 to 5 years of breaking it down to get there. It depends how many resources you can toss at it. Netflix had a monolith, and they would have outages on their Netflix system, and it took them 7 years to go ahead and re-architecture and restructure their organization so that they could have a microservices system. It does take time, but you can do them in parallel. You can have one monolith system, and you can slowly break it down. You don't have to do an all or nothing, because the reaction is, let's just build everything from scratch then if we have to redo it. And I think you know what comes next. It's a trap. You don't want to do that. You get more value from re-architecting and refactoring your brownfield projects than you do from starting a greenfield project. So you're going to get more return on investment. The DevOps Handbook, another book that I highly recommend, talks about this. Working efficiently with what legacy code does as well, and a book called Clean Code. They all talk about don't start a new project from scratch because you're probably going to do the same things you did. You want to find out what works in your current system and break them apart. So at this point in time, in your infancy, if you've asked yourself the question of how do I get to 10 deploys, you might know where some of your bottlenecks are, and you might have come to the decision that we need to start reducing our technical debt. That's some of the insight that you would get at this stage. On to the next, adolescence. And I put a title of resist because there are a lot of tendencies you have to resist at this stage. In adolescence, you're struggling with DevOps. You said, we've switched to DevOps, we've done a lot of microservices, but it seems way slower than it was before. So let's just do it the old way. And I'm saying resist because you have to resist that urge. What it is new challenges are appearing. And most likely what's happening is you haven't defined your value streams. You haven't optimized your systems for your value streams. You're not breaking down your application at the business seams. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. Another problem that might happen is you have really slow feedback loops, and developers can't autonomously acquisition resources. You might have an organization that has a big chain. Hey, I need this. Okay, ask this person, ask this person. When you want your developers moving quickly so that you can keep up. However, there are things at this stage that your company would be doing. You'd be deploying more frequently. You'd still be putting a lot of effort into it, but it's more frequent than it was before. You're also sharing databases with applications. So you still haven't made that step into, I have a service, it provides value to the customer, it does one thing, I'm going to give it its own database. That's where you need to be. And you might be in the stage where it's like, well, microservice equals web APIs for everything. You don't need web APIs for everything. You can have a microservice that's not a web API. Let's look at value streams for a little bit. So you have your monolithic application. It does all these things. In the case of a factory, I've worked in a factory before, you have all of these systems, logistics, forecasting, inventory, financing, all of these different applications in there. They're in one thing. They share databases, they share data between each other, and that's what makes it hard to change. You change your logistics system, and ordering uses logistics for some reason, but you need to define the value stream. Which one of these gives value to the customer? And it's probably one of these. A customer can make an order, place an order, do everything with an order. This one stream provides value to your business. You want your customers ordering. It should have its own database with its own application stack that does its own thing so that it can specialize. It can share, it can communicate with other services, but it doesn't need to be tied at the hip to other services. And another thing that you want to think about is whenever people jump into microservices, they tend to cut things vertically instead of horizontally. So, oh, we have a service that shows our display, and we have a service that allows programs to communicate, and we have a service, you want to go the other way. You want to say, we do orders. A customer does an order from start to finish. How does the business get value from that? And make your value streams go that way. Make your microservices go that way. So what are some targets for improvement when you're in adolescence? Well, you want to make sure that everything that you're putting into production for customers are in version control in some way, shape, or form. You have to have a repository for all of this. You want to make sure that you have communication methods so that your processes can communicate with each other. You want to make sure that feedback from tests and mock deployments is very fast. I talked about slow feedback loops. Oh, sorry, that's a slow feedback loop. I lost you. I lost you for a little bit. And if that's happening to your developers, you're losing time on development, right? You want to have very quick. It needs to be instantaneous. Otherwise, you lose people. They're not doing what they need to be doing. You identify your value streams. We already talked about that. And you want to start a plan to ensure that each microservice has its own database. We also want to be more pragmatic about writing down the steps to deployment. You want to deploy as a team. Go together, write down the steps to deploy, have them someplace where everyone can see them, go through, analyze what went wrong, why it took us 30 hours instead of 1 hour, figure out how to improve that, and then find the constraint that's preventing you from doing that so you can get improvement overall through the company. The insights from Adolescence. So you understand that automation and identifying your business processes are the way forward, but you have to go through and make sure that everyone in your organization is resisting the urge to go back to do things the old way. Otherwise, it's back to the old way of business and, oh, sorry, microservices didn't work for us. You didn't push through hard enough and you weren't focused enough. Next, let's look at adulthood a little bit. You're streamlining things at this point. In adulthood, you're struggling with documenting the manual steps in the deployment process. Maybe there's a key personnel resource that hasn't told you that this is a step that you need to focus on. You're struggling with allowing non-tech people to deploy. Non-tech people at your company should be able to deploy. That goes back to Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks needs to be able to deploy. It should be a push of a button. At that point in time, you have speed, you have agility. You want to have monitoring systems, and you want to be monitoring your application health. So you're having predictive systems out there so that you can start gathering metrics, and you use the metrics to define how you move forward. Now, you might be doing is creating mini monoliths. Once again, you have systems, and you're tossing everything into these systems when you should be breaking them apart. Even though you have microservices, you don't want them to turn into mini monoliths where you're starting the process all over again and having to solve these problems. You have teams that want to share solutions. They're attempting at it, but maybe you don't have the infrastructure so that they can share solutions. At this point in time, you're starting to understand your true business value. And the true value of your business is speed to market and ability to change, not the product that you have. Lots of companies can make that product. But if you're faster than them, if you can change more quickly than them, you can adapt to the marketplace. You can do A/B testing because you have the infrastructure to do that. You can actually test live on customers. And you can do blue-green deployments. You can say, hey, we're going to try this out. We're going to deploy it. We're going to see how well it works for the customers that are out there. If we have problems, we're going to roll it back, and they can use the previous version. No issues there. Monitoring systems for your application health. You've all seen the screens that say, would you like to automatically send crash reports? These companies are gathering information and trying to test the health of their application so that they know what went wrong with deployments, what went wrong with the current version of the application. Are we at a state that we need to roll back all of our customers? And it gives you the ability to understand the status of your app before your customers so that you can be more proactive on bug fixes and changes. At this stage, you really want to improve upon making sure that your microservices are autonomous. They have to exist by themselves, and they have to provide value by themselves. Once again, that business vertical, not horizontally across the application, but as a value stream. Another thing that you want to do is you want to make sure each one has its own database. If they're sharing databases, you're going to get into the same monolith problem, even though you have microservices. You're not going to be able to deploy separately. And you want to make sure that you're starting to develop self-service APIs so that your developers and other employees in the company can get access to the resources they need without having to go through these bureaucratic processes. And the insight that you would get at this stage is your organization is becoming more proactive and less reactive because you're starting to streamline your processes. The last stage, maturity. You're starting to leverage all of the work that you've done up till now. These are the things that you're struggling with in maturity. Cleaning up dysfunctional microservices. So you've made your microservices, but some of them just don't work. They're slow. They might be these big monoliths still. We'll talk about that. You want to embrace impermanence. What do I mean by that? At this stage of time, your application should have a lot of small parts, and with those small parts, you should be able to say, let's just rewrite this part. It's not the entire application, it's just one part. You want to get it small enough so that instead of adding line by line, you can rewrite and redo, especially if the business process changed, your workflow has changed. Businesses evolve, and what you did 15 years ago isn't the workflow now, and your microservices should reflect that. And you're struggling with hiding your databases because it's going to be developers want to share databases, but you don't want to be sharing. You want to have your applications communicating across. This is what I have in my database. What do you need? Not, here's my database, go get what you want. We don't do that at the DMV. We don't do that at the library. We don't do that at the medical center. You say, I need to take this to the library, you go, get it, and you take that information to the library. The library does not have access to your medical records. These are the things that you are doing. Anyone at the company can release the product or application now. Developments are based on metrics and insights. So you have a workflow where you're saying, I have metrics, let's start a new company initiative to fix this metric. Teams share resources, and at this point in time, it's probably taking you less than an hour to deploy. Hopefully, that's your metric. That's where you would be going for. We've been talking about metrics, but it's all about metrics. This stage, you can gather things like information about how the users are using your application. Oh, we released this feature 6 months ago. 2 users are using it. Let's kill this, find out why those users are using it, and then rework that into a new product that provides more value to more people. Instead of making guesses as to what the market is doing, you have the metrics to make those changes. You can get that to different people in your company, whether it be your UX team, your product managers. They all have this information to swarm a problem and decide on a course of action. You have metrics about stability. You know how stable your product is. Now, I talked about dysfunctional microservices a little bit, and this follows Conway's law. And Conway's law goes, basically, the software that you create will be a reflection of the organization. So if your software is tied together but has all of these weird connections all across, it's probably because your organization is that way. Now, a guy named Jimmy did a talk on avoiding microservice disasters, and he said it better than Conway's law, I believe. A broken, dysfunctional organization driven by meeting unhealthy goals and metrics will produce broken, dysfunctional systems. So, attack your organization. Find out how you can fix the organization to help your software. You've transcended. You're no longer at the software level. You're at the organization level. How can I change things so that my organization makes healthy software? When we're in the maturity stage, this is probably where you need to be focusing your attention. You want to understand how to leverage impermanence, how to say, I can rewrite that, instead of how to say, I want to fix that. You want to be trying to change the culture of your organization to promote healthier applications, whether it's moving people around or getting more people to work in different teams. And you want to be basing everything on initiative. You want to base all your initiatives on openly visible metrics. Now, the insight you would get at this stage would be the organization knows that its true value is speed to market and ability to change, and you're in a position to leverage this to the dismay of your competitors. That's where you want to be. Those are the 4 stages. But I told you there's a twist. Here's the M. Shyamalan twist. There aren't 4 stages. There are probably 6 or more, depending on how you go at it. But it isn't even stages, it's a cycle. You're constantly in this cycle of improving. When you reach one stage and you've reached maturity, you're going to be in the infancy of another stage. So you want to remember that it's a continuous improvement cycle. Finally, you also want to remember that going back to what we talked about, IT is a manufacturing process. You want to make sure that you're able to manufacture out solutions instead of working on fixing these random problems. The functionality of your application isn't changing. You're just changing how you deliver it and how you give it to your customers. That being said, you might have questions. If you ever want to go get coffee with me and talk about these things in more detail, because this is just the overview. That's my email address. You can contact me. We can get coffee. Let's talk. Even if you end up watching this on YouTube. If I still have this email address and you email me, and you're in a place where I can go get coffee with you, let's go get coffee. Let's talk. These are really good reference books that I would like you to read, especially the Phoenix Project. It is an amazing audiobook. It's a story. It is not a technical book, but it takes you across the process of improving a company and why you really want to move to this architecture. It also has a twist at the end. I'm not going to share that right now. You'll have to read the book yourself. The Goal is another one. Once again, it's a storybook. The Phoenix Project references The Goal at least 4 times in the book. One of the main characters says, "Have you read the book, The Goal?" It's a really good book. And the rest of the books, Accelerate DevOps Handbook and Building Microservices, these are more technical, but they are very, very good places to start. Additionally, we have some videos that you can reference. My talk previously on gold from a monolithic legacy system, this goes through some of the details of why you want to break it down and how you can go about breaking down your system, as well as some other really good ones. Microservices, how to build systems that survive. This talks about impermanence and always wanting to rewrite instead of add more code, lines of code to a solution. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
How do you see the various skill sets by team, developers, networking, security, etc., working common through these stages?
One more time.
How do you see the various skill sets by team, developers, networking, security, etc., working in common through these stages?
Working in common through these stages. That is a very good question. I didn't touch upon it, but these different skill sets and different. Let me repeat the question first. Basically, what's going on is how do the different skill sets of IT, security, different teams within an organization, how do they work together in common on solving this problem? And it is a good question because what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of contention at the beginning between all of the teams. Security teams want security. Security blocks the ability to do work. It's just how it works. But by trying to cross silos, having somebody from a security team on the dev team so that they know what's happening on the dev team firsthand helps the process move forward very quickly. This goes back to the goal, the Toyota method of going there and seeing it in person yourself. If security is someplace and the devs are someplace else and they're talking, they're not seeing each other's problems. If they're together in the same room, working on the same problem together, they're seeing the problem and they come up with different solutions. Each stage is going to present challenges in the organization, but the biggest thing in solving this is getting the silos down and getting people working together on the issue. Even product teams. If a product team works with developers to get more metrics, the developers can give product teams the metrics to start initiatives, where the product team can get the feedback back to a developer and say, we can do this based off of what we have right now. So it's all about working with the silos you have now, breaking them down, and getting everyone to work together. Very good question. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you.